Hi, everybody. Hope you're enjoying the conference so far. I'm Wilma Hodges. I'll be moderating this session, and I'm sure you're all as excited as I am to hear about the future of the resources tool. Today we have Jeff Pash and Kyle Blythe presenting on this topic. Jeff is the product director from New York University's instance of Sakai. He works closely with designers, developers, instructional technologists, faculty, and other members of the NYU community in continually improving NYU's instance of Sakai and related services. Since 2010, Jeff has been involved with the Apereo community and is a member of the Sakai Project Management Committee. He's led projects to deliver new functionality to Sakai, including a new gradebook and usability enhancements. Kyle Blythe is a business analyst at New York University. He works with project teams to gather requirements and provide functional expertise. He also has provided technical support, guidance, and training to faculty and staff at NYU. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jeff and Kyle.
Great, thank you, Wilma. So I think Jeff was having a connectivity issue. I see he's joining again, so he will probably be in a second.
He is in now. Sorry about that. I just dropped and I came back in. So are we starting?
Yes, it's time.
Okay, great. Hi, everyone. Sorry about that. Just lost my connectivity for a minute there. So I think we've been introduced. So I'm Jeff Pash from NYU. And so today, Kyle and I are going to talk about a potential future for the resources tool. So first, why resources? So we started thinking about this initially when we were conceiving an integration with Google Drive. So that was an interest here at the university, and in order to get that, we pursued a Google Groups integration. And then when we got to the point of looking at resources and saying how can we see our Google items within the resources tool, so using APIs and Drive, it was apparent that there would need to be some changes to the user interface of resources. And then as we thought about that more, we realized that there were other needs around the resources tool. So for example, there's a growing need to integrate content from places like library. There are open education resources, which is a hot topic now, in addition to Google Docs. And as we talked with other folks in the community in various forums, this really seemed to resonate, and a need to improve resources was apparent. We also know that it's very heavily used by faculty and students at NYU, and it's probably similar at other universities. So it's really the most used tool as we have seen it at NYU. So that's an important factor. The current user experience in the resources tool, it's not in line with other commonly used web-based repositories. So Google Drive, Box, Dropbox, etc. There's a standard out there, and it's the resources tool doesn't sort of follow that design in its current form. And as I said, as we spoke with people in the community, there seemed to be strong interest around this. It seemed to resonate with folks. And I'll talk about in a bit sort of these community projects. There has been, talking at Sakai conference, etc., interest in schools putting money together because this is such an important initiative. There's one more piece with this, and that is, the resources tool. It's pretty non-controversial in a sense. I mean, there are many different ways you could approach the lessons tool. There are even many different ways you could approach the assignments tool. But what we're looking at in these file repositories, it's pretty well established in other tools. Like I mentioned, Google Drive, the conventions out there. So we think it'd be pretty easy to get some agreement in the community on this. So as with another farm project, the Gradebook NG project, we'd look at a similar approach with a potential farm project, and that is having a well-defined scope. In the case of resources, that should be pretty straightforward, since, like I said, it's not a controversial change, and there are well-established models out there. Competitive analysis, looking at those other tools in the marketplace. User research and usability testing. Even with those great models out there in the market, there are places where resources interacts with other tools. So we'd want to be thoughtful around how we do those, how we make those integration points, and inform the project with, early user research, see how people are actually doing the work in the system, and then usability testing on prototypes, etc. And then also building in accessibility from the start, also a hot topic today in higher ed. And as we've learned from the Gradebook NG project, early developer input, having this up front so that we get a sense of what is possible, what is reasonable within the time frame of the project. And so I mentioned FARM. So for those of you not familiar with FARM, that's the Funding and Resource Management Group. And so that essentially helps to create a framework for collaborations among other schools, creating templates for how you run a project, and also providing mechanisms for channeling funding. So if you're interested in that, there's the address there, farm.apereo.org. Okay. So in terms of feature scope, talking with other folks, like I said, at the Sakai conference and in other venues, the feature scope would really be aiming for greater parity with modern web-based repositories. And what are some of the standard features of those? Well, a simplified folder navigation. I think for all of you who have used the resources tool, you know what that's like today. And taking a model from Google could really improve that, we think. Drag and drop throughout the interface. That's a really basic feature. Easy access to persistent content links. So today, if you upload a resource, put it in a folder, and grab a link for it, if you move that, that link is built with the folder path. So today, if you move that around, you can break the link. So we'd want to aim for something like you see again in Google or Box, for example, where those links are persistent, regardless of where you place them in folders. And then finally, a document previewing capability. Having to download a Word doc to view it is an inconvenience for users, and there are ways of previewing those in line that could be a real time saver. And then finally, like I talked about, some greater flexibility for integrating third-party content sources, including Google and others. Great. So now I will pass it to Kyle, and he will talk through some of the specific areas.
Great. Thanks, Jeff. Okay, perfect. So we're going to start by talking about the user interface and what would constitute a more redesigned user interface for the resources tool. So you'll notice here that I have an icon for Google Drive sitting here. So that's because we want to be able to try and take options and different features that we've seen to be pretty common across different web repositories, be it Google Drive or Box, Dropbox, OneNote, and even other LMS repositories, and be able to implement that within the resources tool moving forward. The reason I have the actual Google Drive icon here, though, is because I'll actually be using Google Drive screenshots to try and illustrate some of these features. But again, they are pretty standard across the board. Okay, so let's start by talking about a left-hand folder structure. So currently in the resources tool, as Jeff was mentioning, trying to locate resources kind of involves digging down into a tree structure and going into these nested subfolders. And when you start clicking around, things can get a little bit confusing. You never quite have a sense of place within the tool. One of the ways that we can try and address this moving forward is by having a persistent left-hand folder structure that allows you to be able to click into folders and have that folder structure remain present on the left while you can view the content of those folders on the right. So, and by the way, if you'd like to be able to try and get a closer look at these screenshots, I know this might look a little bit small. You can try and maximize this in Big Blue Button. But what we have here is the folder structure in Google Drive, where I can see my main folder. So in Sakai, this would be the equivalent of having your course site folder, and then all of your subfolders nested beneath it. And then to the right, seeing all the contents of those folders. So we think being able to have this persistent folder structure will make it very easy to be able to maintain that sense of place for users. Additionally, as Jeff was also mentioning, having drag and drop throughout the tool, not just for uploading content, but also for reorganizing it. So the drag and drop upload that was added for Sakai 10 to the upload process and resources was a really great feature, and it's received a lot of positive feedback from faculty. But still, you still have to get to it by clicking on an Actions button and then clicking on an Add button. Being able to simply just drag content directly into the resources tool and have it upload into whatever screen you're currently looking at would make it very easy to be able to add content into the system. Likewise, moving content around, rather than having to go through menus and navigation to do that, being able to just drag content to different folders and have it move automatically. So again, looking to Google Drive, you can see here in this screenshot that if I drag a piece of content from the current view that I'm looking at, so I'm in week 1, if I drag that into another folder, it will automatically move into that folder. And if I had this window open, I could also drag content to upload it. So I could take a file that I wanted to upload, and if I dragged it into the main panel right here, it would upload it into whatever panel I was looking at. So it would upload it into week 1. But I could also upload it into any folders that are listed on the left here. As soon as I drag it over it, I will see the sort of outline over where I'm going to be uploading the file. And I think people find that to be very intuitive. So intuitive, in fact, they don't even really think about it most of the time. But we think this would be a great option for being able to upload and reorder content within the interface. Additionally, we have Modal Windows. So this is something that we focused pretty heavily on with the gradebook project. It came out of user research and just usability testing that going to different screens in the system to accomplish things, people lose their place and they kind of forget what they were doing in the system. So having a modal window, a light box that opens over the content that you were previously looking at, allows you to maintain that sense of place and be able to have a more immediate sense of what you're doing within the system. So again, this is something that you see throughout Google Drive, as well as a lot of other applications, that if you want to edit information or upload content, you'll get a nice little window that'll open over the screen that you're currently looking at. So we'd like to be able to incorporate that in resources as well, whether it be the edit item details or upload screens, taking those actions and placing them within the context of a persistent navigation within resources. Okay, and this is kind of a two-parter, but simplified copying of file links. So on one hand, if you want to be able to get the link to a file in the resources tool as it currently exists, it requires digging down into the edit item details screen. And if you're like me, you sometimes just glaze over when you try and look at it, and you sometimes can't even find where you want to be able to grab that file link. So we want to be able to surface that more easily within the tool so that people can grab those links and be able to send them out more easily to their students. So looking at the way that Google does this, when you right-click on an item, you immediately see the ability to get a shareable link. In fact, there's also a link icon that appears right here at the very top of your header. So no matter what item you're currently clicking on, you can very easily get a shareable link for that item. So we want to be able to surface that more easily. But along the same lines, we also want to be able to make persistent URLs for content happen. So as Jeff was mentioning about how content can get broken, those links can get broken as content is moved around, we want to be able to provide a single persistent URL for each piece of content as it gets uploaded into the system. That way, if you're using the lessons tool and you decide to reorganize your content, for example, you don't have to worry about the link breaking and ending up with a file that doesn't exist anymore. So just to illustrate this, in Google Drive, when you get a link for this content, I could move this content anywhere in my Google Drive, and that URL right here will always stay the same. So we'd like to be able to see that try and happen in the resources tool moving forward as well. And then this one is pretty basic, but just viewing options for resource presentation. This is just a degree of kind of flexibility and customization that allows people to view content the way they want to. So whether you would want to have it display as a list, a series of listed items, or having larger icon-like views of your content. This is just a nice feature that we find is really nice for users. So here we have a list view. If I click on these sort of 4 blocks, this little icon here, it will instead make my content appear in sort of larger blocks. So just some visibility options for content. Additionally, we want to be able to simplify the copying and moving of content between sites. So as I'm sure those of you who have tried to do this in Sakai right now know, it can be a little bit difficult if you want to try and move content around within your resources to different sites. There's a copy content from my other sites kind of bar at the bottom of the screen that when you click on it, expands all of your other sites, and then you have this sort of tree structure that you have to dig down through. And as you click on things, the screen kind of reloads, so it jumps you back up to the top again. We want to be able to simplify this by selecting a copy or move option for a file, and then bringing up something similar to what you see in the Sites menu, where you'd be able to look to the exact site that you want to grab content from or move content to, and then dig down and just select that particular site. So make this very easy and more so contextual for the actions that you want to take. Okay, and now the global add button. So this is another thing that we've seen in resources that can get a little bit confusing. So currently, if you want to upload content into a folder in resources, you have to go to the actions button that appears to the right of that particular folder. And judging how many folders you have, you might have many different action buttons that all kind of look the same. But the upload files for a particular folder is available only within that one actions bar. So we think that having a single upload button makes things much easier. And how do you control where the content goes if you have multiple folders in place? The same way you do in a lot of these other repositories, content gets uploaded just depending on where you're actually sitting in the tool at that moment. So if I'm looking at week 3 and I click the add button, it goes into week 3. So we think this will dramatically simplify the process for uploading content, and that this will be very intuitive for users that, just depending on where you are in the tool, this upload button will add content where you're currently looking. Yep. So in this case, I'm adding content into week 1 when I click on this add button. Okay. So this is just an idea we've been thinking about regarding the starring of files. It's something that you see a lot in Google's products, especially in Gmail, but the idea to sort of favorite content as you work with it fairly often. So one thing that we've been thinking about is the ability to take a file and, if you'd like, star it. And then that content would be easily accessible to you moving forward. You wouldn't have to go necessarily to that court site to access that file. In fact, it might show up in your home resources tool if you star that file. So this is something that would be sort of dependent upon the instructor to choose whether or not they want students to be able to star their files. But if they do, starring a file would add it to your My Resources tool in home so that you could always access it from there. Okay, and then this is a big one, inline document previewing. So as Jeff was mentioning, this is a very powerful feature and makes just working with resources much easier. Oh, sorry, I see we have a couple of comments here. The resources copying procedure is not intuitive. Yep, absolutely. And would it be easier to hide files? Potentially, yes. I think that this is something that we could also surface along with the ability to sort of more easily get the link for a file. is to be able to sort of toggle these options without having to dig into a very, sort of dense, complex screen. Absolutely. But yes, inline document previewing. So the ability to be able to view a file without having to download it or open it in a new window, but having it just open as a kind of an overlay over your current screen. So this is how it works in Google Drive. You can just click on a file and either click on what is basically an eye icon, or even just click the space bar to be able to view that content. So we think that would be very powerful and has a lot of opportunities for using that kind of feature elsewhere in the system as well. So we think that this would be a really useful addition, and we know that there are some open source document previewers out there. I believe that OAE, for example, uses one, but we have different options as far as what we can look at. So potential complicated issue seems to be access permissions for sharing content, Neil, or for hiding it.
If it's okay, I'm unmuted. Yeah, I mean, so if you use a content and your instructor and use it in one course site, and now it's a persistent link and you use another course site, the question, or somewhere else, the question is, should it still be available to the people who used to be able to see it? Should it automatically be able to be seen by the people in the how do you kind of manage those access permissions, or what assumptions you're kind of making about it?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's a very good question that we would need to sort of dig into. I could sort of definitely imagine it. Sorry, go ahead, Jeff.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't think it would change from today. So, I mean, if it's really still going to be only accessible to the people in that site, it's just that that particular resource will be a persistent link, and then when it's copied, what we do sort of behind the scenes in terms of, is it pointing, is it another link sort of, being a pointer to a resource? I mean, that's yet to be determined, but no, we'd envision it sort of working the same way it does today. When you copy resources to a new site, that's essentially acting like another resource, and only the people in that site would have access.
Great, thanks. And it would be great to be able to control permissions to a file easily as well, similar to Google Drive. Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think that access permissions within a course site, they're a little bit trickier. But yes, providing sort of better surfacing for those permissions, whether a file is publicly available or whether it's released to specific sections or groups, providing that in a lightbox window that was more easily accessible within the interface would be a great thing to be able to do. Okay, so a few more features that we want to go through. So improved bulk upload and download capabilities. So we'd like to be able to improve the way that these sort of bulk uploading and downloading takes place. Currently, you have to be able to use a third-party client like CyberDuck and go through what can be kind of lengthy instructions and might be a little bit complicated to be able to actually upload or download content. What you see in other repositories, though, is very simple uploading and downloading, where if you select multiple pieces of content and then select the option to download, it will automatically zip those files up for you and present it to you. So making that content easier to both download and then upload into the system. And then going back to this Google Doc idea that Jeff was talking about, increased flexibility for external resource integrations, providing some hooks and a framework within the tool that would allow you to be able to take things like library resources or Google Documents and incorporate them more seamlessly into the resources tool. So using the example of what we see here, when you click on the ability to upload a file, having options for these specific hooks so that you can easily go in and be able to create these types of content. Okay, so let me see if we have a few other comments here. Okay. It seems like a great project to modernize the Sky experience that feeds the whole system. Absolutely, absolutely, because the resources tool also ties into specific screens, like when you're just adding an attachment and other tools, it brings up a part of the resources tool. So there are opportunities to sort of modernize the experience throughout. Okay, so we talked about the different features that we would like to see sort of in this initial idea of the resources tool. We also have a preliminary mock-up that we'd like to show. that kind of bases off of what we see in other web repositories and tries to tie it in with what we see in Sakai. So here we have a simplified resources tool with less tabs and more just available immediately in the interface. So we see this left folder structure that's persistent, and then the contents of the folder displaying in the main frame here. We see a persistent header across the top that would show me where I am, as well as different quick access options for these different files. So if I'm highlighting a file, I could easily preview it. I could easily edit its details, grab the shareable link for it perhaps, delete it, or go in and change the view from this sort of list view to more of an icon-based view. We've also thought about ways of kind of surfacing other information like the site quota, having that display in the bottom of this left menu here. And then front and center is just this one add resource button. So you could click on this and add your different resource types directly from here. So if I were to click that add resource button, it would look a little bit similar to that actions button that we have in the interface right now, where I could add a new folder and then go through the process of uploading files, web links, text documents, HTML, etc. But then below that, we have an example of one of these sort of external resource hooks, the ability to add a Google item, for example, in here. If I were to click on that, it would take me through whatever process existed for that external resource item, and then it would get added in line with the rest of my files right here. And then as far as accessing additional options for a file, having just a drop-down for each particular file that you would go into where you could view the item to preview it, edit it, make a copy, and choose where you'd like it to go, again, using sort of that sites menu, sort of visual design. Same with moving the item, uploading a new version as we have right now in Sakai, and then getting the link to it. And as we were talking about earlier, perhaps adding it to your quote-unquote favorite files. So you can see that with the stars here on the left as well. So yeah, that's pretty much what we have as far as an initial mock-up goes. So let's talk about next steps.
Great. So I see a question or two in there. Have we considered time release function? We have now. Yeah, that's something to look at for sure. Where's the edit content option?
Okay.
Edit content option.
So like the edit item details, I think. So that would be either in a drop-down for an individual item, or perhaps sitting up in a persistent top menu once you have an item selected.
Yeah. And that next question, where does one change permissions for individual items? So it's yet to be determined. These are still just early mock-ups, and we'd have to think through exactly how we'd want that to work. Like we said, we'd obviously look to Google for that, but also, keeping in mind that this is a learning management system. It is something different from Google. So yeah, we'd still need to determine that. Ooh, let's see. These are just scrolling up. This can't go in 11.2. Right. Maybe not 11.3. Yeah, this is, let's see. Sorry, a lot of these came at once, so it just scrolled up on me. Either HTML or text. Another nice feature related to permission issues with linking across sites would be a more informative 403 message. Yeah, that's a great idea. Right. So yeah. So in terms of, we'll just say, in terms of next steps, this is, we kind of came full circle there. Kyle, if you go back 2 slides to kind of the add Google. Yeah, exactly. So add Google item. That's really where this, like I said, where it started with our, desire from our user advisory group to be able to integrate with Google Docs. And so it sort of started with that thought of, okay, I can click on that. We can leverage the Google APIs to show me what's in Drive, and then I can add it in. But then when you start thinking about, who that Google resource is shared with. So, we have the ability to create Google groups now that we have in pilot that, we want to contribute back, and talk to us more about that sometime. But when you have those in your resources, and if they're shared with, if those Google resources are shared with particular people or particular groups within the site, you'd probably want to be able to see that. So then we started thinking around, oof, we're going to have to surface that a little differently. We're going to have to do this and that. And a couple of weeks later, this is what happens. Kyle makes a mock-up. So like I said, this is very early on. And in terms of next steps, we do, just based on the feedback we've gotten from people so far, the reception of this, we do see it as, a potential farm project. It does seem to resonate with folks. And then, like I said, it seems to be a pretty straightforward approach. Like I said, not too non-controversial in terms of what we'd be looking for. And so our goal is to sort of further feel out the interest in this, the ideas for people, from people, and to see, if there are schools or other entities that, want to get involved in this, so we can have another community project where we're pooling the financial resources to get something done that's really important for the community. So maybe we just jump forward to I think there might be a farm slide in here. Yeah. So like I said, we'd love to see this sort of fit in to the pantheon of community projects out there. So yeah, if you're maybe the VC project for this year. Interesting, Terry, go lightly. Yeah. So just we're definitely open to any questions or suggestions that you all have. I see one there. Would this still invoke L-Finder on the back end? Something to think through. Thank you, Mariano, for voting. Are there any other questions? You can also unmute and ask a question if you'd like. There are actually two edit functions in existing Sakai resources. Edit content, this is available for HTML or text documents. You can create within resources and edit details. Yeah, thank you for that, Tiffany. And I think somebody was alluding to that earlier. So thank you for clarifying that. Great. Any other questions, comments, suggestions? Right. Ability to pull up a Word doc and add comments to it without leaving resources. That's very interesting. I mean, that sort of gets into this whole preview capability, and we'd have to see, in addition to preview, there is that annotation capability that I think is probably in box view. Does that sound right, Kyle?
Yeah, that's absolutely.
So there are products out there that is a commercial product, but there are products out there that do that. So yeah, that would need to be explored, that capability. Version history. Yeah, right. Yeah, and I guess it depends. If you're uploading the document, multiple versions of the document, you would see that. But then, yes, if you were doing a text document or an HTML document, then yeah, you'd be looking for kind of a version history or revision history, like in Google. Mm-hmm. With the pencil icon at the top bar, maybe we should jump back to the mock-up.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, so I think we're talking about this right here.
Yep, go for it, Kyle.
Sure, absolutely. So I mean, as we were just initially, imagining it, just thinking about uploaded file types, that pencil icon was referring to the edit item details. But that's a great point that you're raising about the difference between editing the content and then editing the item details. So we would have to think through that one a little bit. But I think providing easy access to both of those would be paramount.
Yeah, and then where did it go? Right, from Rutgers, or add in an annotating tool like Crocodoc. Yeah, so Crocodoc was bought by Box, and Crocodoc is now Box View, is our understanding of it, and it's a proprietary tool. But like Kyle mentioned, there are some open source. We know that there are at least open source previewing libraries. We're not sure about the annotation piece, but it's definitely worth looking into. Even if version history only worked for internally created HTML, it would be terrific. Cool. Yes, thank you, Wilma. It sure does. OAE does have doc preview, and we've kind of just did an initial. One of our developers did an initial glance at that, a while back. But yeah, we'd have to take another look. Great. Well, I don't see any other comments or questions. Really happy to see a good turnout here. Oh, here we go. It would be nice if it can be more like Google Docs, where docs could be edited with an edit content type option too. A lot of instructors want easy collaborative document creation and resources. I love that you bring that up, Tiffany. We've talked about that kind of concept. We didn't mention it today, but there's something in Box. You can create a Box note, for example. So just within the file repository, say create this. Obviously, the same in Google, and there could be that potential in Sakai as well. Beyond a simple text document, maybe just sort of rich text editor, etc., where you could create that document. There might be, in creating that, there might even be the potential for, let's say you create a document, students to access it. There could be the potential for comments or discussion around that document, sort of a simple commenting tool. And anybody from, the OAE world might think that sounds familiar because they did have something a little bit similar to that. So yeah, that's a possibility. Would you move some of these features to Sakai? Oh, right. Yeah, that's a great point because the Dropbox tool in Sakai, essentially does use the same framework as resources. So yes, it would definitely impact the Dropbox tool. That's a great point.
Yep, absolutely, as well as the sort of add attachment window that you access within different tools, and the resources tool that you find within the home area as well.
Yep, absolutely. It would be great if the Google Doc feature would be agnostic enough to link in the future other free options, like, yeah, exactly, other options. Yeah, and that's exactly what Kyle was alluding to as well with hooks. So just making it easier for institutions to link into some of those other repositories, and then as schools, as they develop those hooks, that's something that could be contributed back, and we can start to build up sort of that library of integrations. Document preview would also be great to add throughout all Sakai tools, especially assignments. Amen. Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to say a word about that, Kyle? Preview
Sure.
and assignments.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we think that would be a huge addition to assignments because, especially as we're talking about like these annotation capabilities, providing a way for instructors to be able to access student submissions and potentially even provide commentary and feedback directly within a window. I think that's something that other tools sometimes have. That would be a great addition to the assignments tool.
Just real quickly, kind of 1 minute warning, we're almost out of time.
Okay, so I guess we'll take this last one. Could this development centralize file storage within Sakai across course sites, for example? It seems inefficient to store multiple copies of the same file in different versions of the same course site, academic terms, even though storage is relatively cheap. Yeah, I remember talking about this with one of the developers and thinking about how that could be done, sort of pointing to the same file. And so that's definitely something that could be considered by people smarter than myself. So great. Well, thank you all for joining. Again, it was great to see an awesome turnout.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you, Jeff and Kyle, for a great presentation. I know there was a lot of interest and excitement about this, judging just from the questions asked. So great work as usual. So
Yeah,
thanks for
and of
sharing
course,
with us.
yeah, and of course, feel free to reach out if you have any other questions, or if this is something you or your institution are interested in getting involved with.
Excellent.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thanks. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recorder now.
All right, thanks all.
All right, thanks, everyone.